Hello and welcome to season one, episode 9 of Jacked Up and Being Frank. I'm Jack Abano. It's here with my co-host Frank Aranio. We're going to talk about the Knicks losing a game they should have won in Utah, and we'll talk about Tommy DeVito's first game as a starting QB and the Giants' incompetent management this season, and talk a little bit about the Jets firing their GM and their bye week, and talk about the early NBA season. My first question to start off the episode is how would you evaluate a general manager?
Jack, I think with a general manager, it's their talent evaluation, the people they put in place. I mean, there's so much there, but you got to have someone who knows how to evaluate talent, knows how to put people in place who evaluate talent well. I mean, these days you have the analytics department, which is important, and you got to have someone that knows how to get it done in the short term and the long term. So I think that's a big thing about being a GM versus being a coach or in baseball a manager. The coach, the manager in baseball is more focused on the here and now and the current team, but the GM has to have that long-term approach while at the same time being able to build a roster that's successful in the short term. And I mean, it depends on the market too, but we're going to focus on the New York football teams today, and then particularly a market like New York, which is the biggest one. I mean, you really have to have someone who is able to build a successful team in the near term, but also be able to build it for the future as well. So that's where
Well,
I would start in terms of looking for someone who would be a successful and a high quality general manager or person who's in charge of the football operations, baseball operations, basketball, whatever sport it may be.
yeah, I think the biggest thing is you got to have a direction. You can't be stuck in two. I know you want to look in the future, but you can't be stuck in two. You can't be like, oh, we want to compete. Oh, no, we don't want to compete. Like, we're going to trade away this guy. I mean, you got to have a set standard of you either go for it all or you got to just put in your chips for the next season or the seasons in the next decade. But you got to have a direction. And some teams that aren't good, which we'll get to, do not have a direction. It goes up to the management of just them not being able to pave a direction. And you know what? The direction from the general manager does go down to the coach. I mean, if we're in a win now situation, the coach knows that. The coach and the GM work in tandem, kind of thing. So I don't think that they're that far off as you described. I think they're kind of like they work in tandem together. So I think
Well, I think the
yeah,
coach's day to day job, you're right. They do work in tandem. They have to work together. You want to have a GM and a head coach who, see eye to eye. I mean, you're not going to agree on everything, and it's good to have some disagreement for sure. I think that makes you stronger as an organization. But the coach, the head coach, I mean, the whole coaching staff, but the head coach really needs to focus on preparing the team right now, getting ready for the next game, even staying within this season. Yes, the head coach has responsibilities beyond this season, but the roles are different. I mean, there's commonalities, but there's also differences. And I think a really good GM is someone who can get it done in the short term, but also have that vision in the long term. And I think it depends on the market. I mean, just look. I'm gonna go to baseball. With baseball, I mean, there's certain markets, there's certain organizations where they're smaller market, and they gotta, they gotta choose. They can't really do it both at the same time in terms of short term and long term. You see like the Kansas City Royals, like they'll build. It takes them a while to build. They'll have really bad major league seasons, and it'll take them 4, 5, 6, 7 years. But then they build something, and then they wind up, having a couple of years where they have a chance to win a championship. Like if you go back about a decade with the Royals, 2014, they got to the World Series Game 7. 2015, they win it. They don't get to the playoffs until this previous year. It took them that long to build it again. So that's Kansas City. But New York, you really should be able to do both. Boston, you really should be able to do both. Philadelphia, Chicago, Los Angeles. I know the NFL's different because of the hard salary cap, the way it's structured, but any New York teams, like to me, there's no excuse for not being able to do both. So the situation that the Giants and the Jets are in right now, and their situations are different, but the similarity is they both stink. So it shows the ineptitude of the organization and the leadership in those organizations.
You want to get into why I think Joe Shane is not a good GM in the way that he cannot balance between is he going to rebuild or is he not going to? Well, then we look at the offseason where we're like, let's pay Saquon. Let's pay Saquon, but then they go back and they say, no, let's not pay Saquon. Let's stick to Daniel Jones. Well, you want to win. If you think Daniel Jones is the franchise QB, you want to win. That's
honestly, Jack, I am more confused about what the Giants have been doing than the Jets. And we've been really hard on the Jets. I mean, I'm a Jets fan, you're a Giants fan, so I particularly go after the Jets because of the frustration of being a Jets fan. And I follow the Giants closely, but I follow the Jets more closely being a Jets fan. But like now I'm like, I'm actually more confused about what the Giants are doing. Like it was right to move on from Daniel Jones, but they made the evaluation that he's a guy to give all that money, and now he's gone. And it's what are they doing right now? Like, where is this thing going? Where at least with the Jets, it's like, all right, like I could see. I don't want to say light at the end of the tunnel because I don't trust them. I don't have confidence in them, but like I could kind of come up with a plan for them, or like, okay, Aaron Rodgers is going to come back again next year, and they do have a lot of talent, which obviously hasn't been enough because they don't have the coaching and it's just a mess. But at least you can see with the Jets, it's like, all right, like they could put this thing together for next year. And if they bring in the right coach, if they bring in the right GM, which I don't think they will because I have no confidence in Woody Johnson. But the Giants, it's like, where are they going from here? I mean, to me, the Giants are just a total disaster right now. And even Brian Daboll, I thought he was going to be the real deal. And I don't think he's primarily to blame. I mean, it sounds like you want to blame the GM first and foremost, but what do the Giants do from here?
I want to blame management, like management in general. I think John Mara's like evaluation of Daniel Jones was awful. It was completely awful, and it wasn't good. We obviously couldn't see when the guy was good, he was running, and he was either doing a read option with Saquon, or he didn't really have that throwing talent that they thought he had. So I think that evaluation was awful by John Mara and the whole management. It's not just Joe Shane, but I think these small things of giving up a safety and Xavier McKinney, who got an interception yesterday, bring it back for not even a touchdown. I think you bring it back for a long way, but he's a great safety. So you have the developmental piece, and he was also a guy the Giants bring up, but they decided not even to like care about him in the free agency, not even give him a little look, even though right now he looks like one of the best safeties in the NFL. So it's like you didn't even give him a look in free agency, but you're trying to build this winning team around Daniel Jones. As you're saying, going into this season, you're trying to build a winning team around Daniel Jones. We know it's not going to be a winning team, but that's what they think. And they don't go after a great safety. They don't keep their best player in a long time. You just let him go to the Eagles because you don't want to pay him. And you're in New York. I guess Philly's paying him, but to be fair, Philly's definitely a big market, and they're paying him. But again, you're a big market too. And this is a guy that was in your locker room and wants to play for your team. Saquon wanted to play here. Saquon wanted to play and wanted to be a New York Giant for life. He wanted to. But the thing is, they just let him go. They just said, no, we're not.
I think it looks worse now because of the way he's played, how great he's been this season. Where I thought a lot of Giants fans, when Saquon went to the Eagles, were like, okay, it's, we're not in a win now situation. We're rebuilding. It's not going to be a good year coming up. So it makes sense to let him go and have the cap space. So I feel like the tune has changed now, and it really hurts because he went to the Eagles, and the Eagles are having a really good season. Arch rival, I get that. But I don't think that move is their biggest problem. But I get what you're saying, though. I mean, it's, this marquee player, franchise player, you let him go to the arch rival, and he's having an incredible year with them, and he'll probably continue on to have incredible years with them. So that really hurts.
He's probably going to be a top. Like, we'll look at him, and he'll be a top 5 running back of all time if he doesn't get healthy. If he stays healthy. I mean, this guy's electric. I mean, you saw him last night in prime time. This guy's electric. He's gonna be one of the best running backs of all time. I said it. I think that's not even far fetched at all. The way he's playing, but Saquon is a guy that you need. I get on the field, you might say, okay, we need to replace him, but right now the locker room's in shambles. We have a rookie trying to lead us and trying to speak to media and having his voice be heard. No, bring in, keep a vet, not a vet running back, but a guy who's been there, done that running back, who's a talent, who you might win some games and you don't want to win, but again, he's the guy in the locker room that's going to take the blame, that's going to take the accountability. He's going to be the leader, and you should let that go. That's not. You cannot.
But don't their problems go well beyond Saquon Barkley not being there?
I do think it, but you cannot weigh leadership.
Like if he were there, they'd still stink this year.
Yeah.
I mean, instead of being 2-9, what are they? 4-7, maybe? Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, they still would. They weren't good with him last year.
I just think
the playoffs a couple years ago. I mean, how many years was he with the Giants? I don't remember. But I mean, they made the playoffs in 2022, but before that, they weren't good. So even with him there, the Giants weren't good.
But look, I mean, you have a superstar player you can always trade up in the draft to get a
It's also a running back too, and I think it's more of a passing league. Now, I know what. Look, he's great.
Yeah.
But I think their problems go well beyond Saquon Barkley, and I don't even think that's was their biggest issue. I mean, it hurts now. I mean, you see how great of a year he's had, so that it's with the Eagles. I get that, but they have bigger problems than that. And I mean, it's simple with football. It starts with the quarterback position. They just released their quarterback that they gave a massive contract to, and they got Tommy DeVito, who you may or may not find him entertaining and exciting. Like personally, I enjoy the Tommy DeVito story, but it's really a joke for the Giants. I mean, they don't have a legit quarterback anymore. I mean, they're playing DeVito, and the backup. Who's the backup again?
Lock.
Yeah, Lock was the second string guy. He's still second string now. DeVito jumps him. So I mean, it just starts with that position, and it doesn't get any bigger of a mess than the Giants have at that position. And then you watch that game yesterday. I mean, that thing was just absolutely pathetic. And I watched the whole game. And I mean, like, it's just everything. I mean, it's an absolute debacle. And again, we spent a lot of time focusing on the Jets. And I mean, the Jets are just a mess. But at least the Jets have had, these close losses where it shows what the Jets are. I mean, they're a losing franchise, and they find ways to lose, and they have their problems. But again, at least with them, it's there's talent there. There's a lot of talent on the roster, and maybe you can make it work. Where if you do get the right coach and you do get the right GM, and you got a chance of turning the thing around next year, and maybe Aaron Rodgers, he's been okay. Like he hasn't been terrible.
Quarterback too.
Like he could. He could get the job done. Like he's not going to be MVP Aaron Rodgers, but it's not like he's not been bad. He's been okay overall. He's not as mobile as he used to be. But anyway, like the Jets, there's some signs there where it's like you could make a case that it could turn around quickly and they could be good next year. I'm not counting on it, but it's possible. The Giants, it's like where is this thing going? I mean, you got to draft a quarterback now. I think you just got to hope you lose the rest of the games, which I was looking at the schedule. I mean, what is there? Maybe one win there, the Saints game. I mean, they're going 3-14, 2-15. I mean, they're the worst team in football.
Yeah, I mean, I have this on my screen. It says New York could have dealt Azeez Ojulari and Darius Slayton at the deadline, and Darius Slayton didn't have a catch. Azeez Ojulari is now hurt. But they did the same thing with Xavier McKinney and Saquon Barkley last deadline. This management is awful. This management doesn't know what they're doing. They obviously don't, because they could have traded Xavier McKinney and Saquon Barkley last offseason and could have got adequate assets for them, but they didn't want to do it. And then this season, they do the same thing. It's like, okay, we want a good product, but anyway, your product's going to be trash either way. So it's like you want a good product, but your product's going to be trash either way. So why not just bottom out and get better for the next season? But because you want to keep Darius Slayton and Azeez Ojulari.
Do you want them – obviously you want them to – get a high draft pick, number one pick. I mean, that should be they should get the number one pick. I mean, they're the worst team in football. So they should have the number one pick. They should get the quarterback they want. Now, do you want them to do that and then try to sign a veteran guy as a stopgap to try to be competitive next year, or is this a situation where you're just punting on next year? It's going to be another season where you lose a lot of games, you have another high draft pick. Like what are the Giants? What are the Giants trying to do? Not only long term, trying to get that quarterback, the guy, the franchise guy, but what are they doing in the short term in terms of next year? Like, are you trying to make that a competitive season where you sign a veteran quarterback? Or is it you're totally punting on it and you're just gutting this thing and rebuilding it?
Well, I think the biggest thing is what can make the Giants fun again, and I think that's a new quarter. I think that's a
Well, you want to
new.
have fun or you want to win? I
Well,
mean,
right now,
winning is fun.
no, right now the Giants are lonely, awful, and they're not winning anything. Of course, you want to win next season, but with the new quarterback, people are going to want to show up to the games, and it's gonna be fun. I mean, you may not win every game. It's a new quarterback, but obviously, right now we're watching is not fun at all. So there's no enjoyment coming from the game as a fan. So once you get a good quarterback, a young quarterback in there, and you develop him.
Do you
Yes, you
want to
won't
put
get.
that guy in there right away, though? Or do you believe in, let him learn, let him sit, have a veteran guy there in front of him, let him develop? Before you put him in there, maybe he's the quarterback by the middle of the year. Or maybe it's year 2. I mean, look at what the Patriots did with Drake May. And I mean, I haven't watched the Patriots a lot. I saw him against the Jets a little bit in some other games, but May has been promising. So, but he didn't start the year as a quarterback. His first game was, I don't know how many games in, but it was a few games in. They had, what was it, Jacoby Brissett was the quarterback, and then May became the starter. So do you go with that, something like that, or are you looking for a guy that you're putting him in there week 1?
It definitely depends on the quarterback. I mean, you had Bo Nix, who was very like polished quarterback coming in. You put him in the fire because you know he could get out of him. Bo Nix has been a very one of the top QBs in the league as a rookie.
Well, do
So
you want to put a guy in the fire right away in New York? Is that a factor?
uh, I mean, yes, it is, but I think it depends on what the quarterback is. I mean, obviously, if you get a very raw quarterback, you probably and you have a good quarterback too that you could bridge the gap. But again, this is making me. I think I'm a big guy of best case scenario. You bench the quarterback for the first 5 games, first 7 games. But as I'm saying, it's like
Well, could the Giants build their roster enough for next year where they could have a pretty good team if you get a veteran quarterback, you let that guy play, you try to be competitive, and then you see where you're at. And if you're competitive, that veteran quarterback's playing well, just keep going with them. Let the franchise guy sit behind him and develop and learn, and then he could be the guy year 2. Or, if it's not going well, then you could put that franchise guy, the draft pick quarterback in there sometime in the middle of the season. So again, like my question is, can the Giants go the approach of where let's try to put it together where we can be competitive next year, or is it no way? They got to be looking 2-3 years down the road.
I think the Giants are going to try to be competitive. I think they're going to try to. They might try to get a veteran quarterback, but I feel like you bring in a new general manager, you bring in a new coach, you clear house, which is what probably they're going to do. I don't know for certain, not 100% like other teams, but I think they're going to clear house. You kind of want to give him his guy. They're going to select their guy. So if you select your guy, you're probably going to go with that guy to start day 1 because you selected him. So it's like, and then I don't know. I mean, they could bring in a vet. They definitely could, but I feel like with a new GM, new whole management, and a new coach leading the system, I would think
So you want to fire Dable?
Fire Dable, fire Shane. I think I know I hate the coaching carousel. I honestly do, but I think it has to happen. It has to happen because this team has not shown any growth in the last 3 years. I know they haven't given anything to grow with, but there's been chances here and they just haven't done anything. I think it's time to really, especially if you're thinking of bringing a new quarterback. I think it's very safe to bring in a new guy and like other teams are doing. I think that's a trend nowadays. So just when you get a when you feel like the Commanders felt like last year is their time. They're gonna get a high pick. They're gonna get somebody very good like a Jaden Daniels. They need to get a new head coach. So I feel like that's a trend going around the league of just like we know this is our time to get a quarterback. Let's get a new coach. Let's get a new management. Let's get new faces in there and let's start this. I feel like this is a trend around the league, at least when I'm thinking. They could do something very different, but I feel like that's a trend around the league of getting a Dan Quinn in there and getting a Jane Daniels in there, just starting it over again. That's worked tremendously for them.
Yeah, I mean,
yesterday, best case scenarios is you have 5 games, 7 games if the guy to just sit down and watch NFL football. Well, look, I think that's just best case scenario. I don't think I'm just thinking best case scenario here. I mean, if it happens, it happens, but you got to be ready to play day one if you want to be the franchise QB for me. Like if I'm making the team, I know best case scenario, if you have a very good QB too, put him out there. That's just best case scenario, but franchise QB, I'm usually playing day one if I don't think my QB2 is fit. Which I don't think
I think if you're playing the franchise QB, you're playing hopefully the number 1 pick for the Giants. You're giving up on next year. So are you willing to do that? Say, you know what, we're going to have to go through a process, and next year is going to be a losing season, and probably another season where the record is so poor that they get into the top pick, top 5 pick, top 3 pick. I mean, is that what you are willing to do, or saying no, like can't waste seasons as the New York Giants? We should be able to build something for next year where we could try to be competitive. I mean, where are you at on that?
I think fresh start. Let's try to bottom out next season. I hate to be the guy, but look, you're gonna have to bottom out.
Do you agree
season.
with that? If you're starting
Yeah.
the franchise QB from day one, then you're punting on next season?
Yeah, you could somehow win, but I mean, you could somehow win, like the Commanders have done, but I don't think the Giants pieces are good enough to do that. So, yeah, it's gonna be a punt next season, but I think it's gonna be good because you bring in a new management. So, you give him a way to you give him like a template of a quarterback.
Where do you think the fan base is at on that? Do you think a majority of the fans are willing to go through that? Do you think a majority of the fans are willing to punt on another season and let the franchise QB develop the roster? Or do you think a majority of fans saying no, like this is not acceptable, this is the New York Giants, and we got to put a competitive product out there next year and try to do both, get the franchise QB, develop them, but try to be competitive in 2025?
The fans, they want to compete, but I think they understand what process they wanted for. They wanted Daniel Jones to be gone a long time ago. So you understand what the process is. I mean, you want to be gone a long time ago. You understand what the process is going to be now of getting a new QB, but I think they would be happy. I mean, you get a new QB in the system. We may lose. I think that's what happens when you get a new QB. You lose. You go through growing pains with a new QB and you lose a lot. But I think the fans are right for that because they're numb to that. But I think also the fans are like, if it's not Daniel Jones, we're not tanking. Like, anything's better than Daniel Jones for them at this point. So it's just they'll see. I mean, we'll see how the QB plays, but I think the QB will play very good under a new system that the Giants will bring in. I don't trust John Mara's hiring, but just gonna have to get a full rebuild. I think they're gonna need it because I don't know. Daniel Jones, 6 years of Daniel Jones. They needed it. They needed him to be off the team. I'm not going to be that guy, but like they need to be benched. They need him to be gone, and they need to start over. It's a mistake that Joe Shane made, but he won't be in our organization next year. So
I'm torn on the head coach. He did a good job 2 years ago in his first year. Very good job. I mean, he was looked at very favorably. So there's good things there, and I don't know. I mean, it's 3 years. It's quick to get rid of him, to fire him. I mean, this year has been a disaster, but he's obviously going to be accountable, and he has blame in this. But I feel like things, now are really changing because after yesterday and what a disaster that was. But what do you really expect to happen? I mean, they're a joke. They stink. They got Tommy DeVito at quarterback. I don't know. Like the guy showed a lot of promise as head coach the first year. And it's 3. It's not like it's 4 or 5 years. Then okay, it's time to go. And then like he's an offensive guru, and he has a great reputation of building offenses and developing quarterbacks. So maybe do you already have that guy, and it's like, hey, go get the quarterback, and you already have the head coach to develop the quarterback. So I think the Giants have to be careful with that. Like, we're not there behind the scenes. I don't know how he's running the team behind the scenes. Like, if it's just a mess and, he's just clearly not the guy anymore, then you get rid of him. But I don't know if the right thing is firing Brian Daboll.
Yeah, I don't think it's the right thing, but I think it's a sad business. And if you're not producing and your GM's not producing who you bring in, it's a sad business, but you're not gonna. I don't see the Giants firing one and not firing the other. Is that?
Well, that's a good point, because if you're firing a GM, that GM's going to want to come in and hire their own head coach.
I know you said the Saquon move is not terrible, but I think on the surface, as a big headline, Saquon paying Daniel Jones 160 and him getting traded and then not signing Saquon, that's a big headline that probably gets you fired. So, if he's gone, then probably Daboll's gone. So
it's a very good point, Jack. If you got a new GM, then that GM's going to want to pick their head coach, and very unlikely to be the guy that's already in place. It could be that GM could come and say, you know what, I like Brian Daboll, keep him as a head coach. The odds are that GM is going to want to bring in their own head coach. So if that's the case, well, it's unfortunate for Brian Daboll, but that happens. So I do get that. But again, I just wonder if the Giants will miss out on a head coach who really does have the capability of having success, and he really did show a lot in that first year. And let's go back and think about where Giants fans were at, and really people around the NFL about Brian Daboll. I mean, he was a superstar the first year. I was like, this guy's the next big thing. So, I think we all could get too high, too low. Maybe it was too high on Daboll the first year. I think now it's too low when it comes to him. But you do bring up a good point about if you're going to bring in a new GM, then you have to let that GM pick their coach. That GM can either choose to keep Daboll, or if that GM wants Daboll out, then you can't force the head coach into the GM. You have to let that GM make the decision on that coach.
Yeah, I just think that's obvious what it is. I think, honestly, Daboll's a good head coach. I just don't think – I think he's lost our locker room. And I think also, the fact of that, he had that good season. So maybe the GM wants him. I mean, with his new head coach, means he's offensive guru.
I don't know. Maybe it's because I've never coached a professional level, obviously, but have coached a number of years. Coaches got to be accountable, no question about it.
Yeah,
and it's ultimately on you as a coach. And if you lose the locker room, there's problems in the locker room. You are accountable for that. But sometimes I think it's like, you know what, the players bear blame too. And I know the buck should. If you're the coach, the buck stops with you. But I don't know if it's always the case where you should fire someone because they quote unquote lost a locker room. Maybe it's a matter of shipping guys out who are the problem, right? Getting the right guys in there, and then the coach has the players that he can work with to build a good team. So I think it's a fine line. I think the great coaches, they establish their way, and they have the structure in place, and they don't lose the locker room. But I don't think it's always I don't think it's always a case where it's okay, lost the locker room or kind of lost the locker room, get rid of the coach. I think sometimes it is good coach is accountable, but it's not a fireable offense. We got to ship some of these players out, or a lot of these players out, get new players in here, and let's see what the coach does with those guys. So, and I think I do think you got to be careful with that.
And also, the players aren't producing, so you have to look at that too. You can't just. I mean, it's the players in the field, man. If they aren't producing, then what can the coach do? I think we're kind of going through everything, like the GM, the coach, but it's players in the field, man. If they're not producing, then there's not a lot he could do with that. And if players in the locker room aren't the players you want, then why would you fire Ryan Dable? Because what's the point? I mean, you lost the locker room with those players. What are they going to do for us in the future? Nothing.
Yeah, it's like some of these guys I read are, they're mouthing off and they're calling the team soft and all this stuff. And it's like,
if it's your superstar, up and coming superstar wide receiver, I get it. But like, you're having like these guys like mouth off. Oh, but you're a 4-string D tackle, for example. Like,
well, that's what I mean. It's like, get rid of that guy. Like, that's not fire Dable. That's get this guy's rear end out of there. I mean, the Giants are terrible. So it's like, get these guys out. And again, the head coach, I mean, you bring a new GM, I get it. GM chooses the head coach, whether it's Dable or somebody else. But it can't be, it's all on the head coach. Again, the head coach needs the mentality, buck stops here, it's on me, I'm accountable. But these guys mouthing off, it's like, get them the heck out of here. I mean, they're not the right guys to be there. So I would just be careful on the Giants with Dable. I wouldn't rush to conclusions after yesterday's game. What the heck did you expect yesterday to happen? I mean, going into that game, it was like, it was a winnable game, and it's like,
no, it's definitely not.
It's not really. I mean, the Giants stink. They're gonna go beat the Bucs. The Bucs got a good offense. I mean, it shouldn't have been as bad as it was yesterday. But what did you really expect going into that game? What do you expect the rest of these games? I mean, they're gonna lose maybe every game the rest of the year. Maybe they'll win one. They could be 3-14, 2-15.
Hey, it's about getting that quarterback. If we go 2-15 against that quarterback, it's about that. But I mean, it's like you put up a wild card team against a bottom 5 team. It's like, what do you think's gonna happen? I don't think it's about that. I just think it's more about the GM making bad decisions. And it's just like the GM picked the coach, so it's like they're both out type thing. I don't know about Brian. I think he does have his mistakes, mishaps. Like, there's some stuff he can work. Like, he has some mistakes.
It's tough to know because we're not there every day. We're not behind the scenes. But take, for instance, Robert Saleh. Seems like a very nice guy, really good defensive coordinator. But he just didn't have what it takes to really lead a team. At least now. Maybe he learned from his experience with the Jets and he'll get another head coaching opportunity and he'll be good. It's possible. It's possible. Guys get better. But with the Jets, it didn't work out for him. It was time for him to go. I thought they should have fired him after last year, which is 3 years in. But it's situational. I think with him, it was clear that he didn't have control of the locker room. He wasn't assertive enough. The Jets are a win-now team, and it just was clear to me and to a lot of people he wasn't the right guy. But with Dable, it seems different to me. It doesn't seem like he's a guy that's not capable of controlling a locker room and asserting himself. I could be wrong. Maybe it's a total disaster behind the scenes. But it doesn't seem like the same situation as, say, the situation with Saleh with the Jets.
I think it's more about, like somebody said it, like what I was reading, like, can they survive this mess? I think it's about surviving this mess. I mean, usually when a mess like this happens, coaches get fired, GMs get fired. So I think it's just like, can they survive it?
But do you really want to make the determination about Dable based off the rest of the season? Like, it's going to be a joke. It's going to be a disaster. Like, what is he supposed to do? The team is abominable. You got Tommy DeVito as quarterback. I mean, they're going to go. Again, look at their schedule. Who are they going to beat? Maybe they beat the Saints. I mean, they're going to be 2-15, 3-14, and hopefully for them they are, because then they get the number 1 pick. But how are you supposed to evaluate Dable off of these last 6 games? I don't think it means anything.
Yeah, I think he's a good head coach. I just think when you have a mess like this, I think we've seen teams going to, like, especially NFL teams. It's a short season. We've seen NFL teams going to this mess of these 8-7 games, and it's like, does the coach survive this mess? Probably not.
Well, I mean, he got a good amount out of Daniel Jones 2 years ago.
Yes.
So doesn't he deserve credit for that? Here's a quarterback who is out, and he should be out. It didn't work out. It wound up being pretty much a disaster. But you had that 1 year, and that was Daboll's first year. So Jones was in New York for 6 years. But Daboll was with him for 3. Jones had the ACL injury last year, so what did he miss? Half the season or more than half the season?
He also got hit in the neck, which he missed a few games.
Yeah, so last year was a disaster, injuries, right? But anyway, Daboll's first year, Jones had a good year, and everybody's like, oh, maybe Daniel Jones is the guy. Well, who's the head coach that had a hand in that? So
that's why I would be like, let's keep Brian Daboll, but
because doesn't it show that he's a guy that could get a lot out of quarterbacks?
Get a lot yes.
He worked with Josh Allen.
I mean, who's the wide receiver?
I mean, he's a guy that clearly has a track record to develop a quarterback. So why are you getting rid of this guy?
Yeah,
I mean, you do have to. I'm sorry to cut you off, but you do have to let a new GM make the decision. I definitely think you got to give the GM that power. But if I'm that new GM, like I'm not just saying, I'm getting my guy in here and Daboll's out. Like I was saying, Daboll, there's a lot of good here. Maybe I'm going to keep this guy.
Yeah, I'm definitely searching the options. But look, I mean, I have a good guy in a coaching position right now, and I'm looking at these bunch of defensive coordinators and offensive like this guy has proven he can be a good head coach in the National Football League for a season. And not a lot of coaches can say that. Robert Saleh never put together a one good season. That's why he got canned. So that's the thing. I definitely think you bring up a good point because Robert Saleh got canned because he couldn't put together one good season. Daboll did that. So a lot of coaches get canned because they can't put together one good season. So that's
a good point. I mean, Saleh had 3 bad years.
Yeah.
And then this year, so 3.5 bad years. I'm saying 3 because I thought he should have been fired after last year. I thought it was just clear that, he wasn't the right guy and, didn't have the leadership qualities and skills to lead that Jets team. That was just not a good fit for him. But he had 3, not even half, let's say 3.5. He had 3.5 bad years with the Jets. Daboll had, what do you want to call the first year? I mean, that was a very good year.
Very good.
It was unexpected. People were not expecting the Giants to be a playoff team.
Wide receivers in that season. I mean, Richie James Jr., Isaiah Hodgins came out of nowhere.
I think about how fun that year was. You talk about having fun. That was a fun year. I mean, the Giants. That was their most successful season in the last 13 years. And Brian Daboll was the head coach. Daniel Jones was the quarterback, and he clearly helped Jones and developed Jones that year. They won a playoff game.
I don't think you should be calling plays, though. I don't think so. I think he needs to be the head coach. You need to get an offense coordinator in there. I think a GM can definitely make the agreement of we're going to get an offensive coordinator in here, but you could stay. But I just don't want you running the show. Like I think Kafka ran most of the show in that season, and it was pretty good. I mean, Brian Daboll had something to do with it. Definitely, they were both going over. They're both chatting at the office, talking about their offensive plays, how they can get Daniel Jones the ball, how they can get Saquon the ball. But I think it was mostly Mike Kafka really at that title of the offense coordinator that really gave him that offense. And it was nice to see him run the offensive plays. But right now, it's a lot of just Brian Daboll calling the offensive plays. It's just like, and I know he could do it, but like he's the head coach. And you could bring somebody in.
The Giants have always been historically a patient organization, too. They have not been quick to fire head coaches. Now, in recent years, they have because they've really had bad seasons. So it has changed in recent years. But the Giants, when they were a good organization, a successful organization, and they had their down years, but like the Giants won 4 Super Bowls. They went to 5. And the Giants historically are a good NFL franchise. And when Tom Coughlin was the coach, he started with the Giants in 2004. That was Eli's first year. Eli became the starter in the middle of the season at Kurt Warner, and they were actually 5-4, and they went to Eli Manning. But anyway, that was his first year. They didn't make the playoffs. 2005, they won the division, made the playoffs, but got blitzed in the first round. And then 2006, they started well and then collapsed. They went 8-8. They made the playoffs, lost in the first round. But after the 2006 season, Coughlin's third year, there were rumblings of him being fired. People were calling for him to be fired. Giants ownership stayed with him. They wound up going to win in the Super Bowl the next year in 07. So, you can say it's apples and oranges, but, I think there's historical precedent with the Giants where it's, they weren't quick to get rid of Coughlin. They didn't get rid of him after year 3. They kept him around. They wind up going to win the Super Bowl the next year, and then they win another Super Bowl 4 years after that. So I'm not saying Brian Dable's going to wind up being Tom Coughlin, but, again, I think there's good things there with him. I'd be careful getting rid of him.
I definitely would, but I think honestly this team has shown their fair share of patience with their quarterback and Daniel Jones. Been patient with him. Didn't work out, so I don't see them being patient again. I mean, yeah, I would love to. Like, I think it would be great to keep Dable and get a new GM, but I don't think this team is patient anymore. I think this team was like, I don't know. They could be. I could be speaking like nothing, but I feel like this team is done being patient. Like they're just done with it because they waited so long, 6 years for Daniel Jones to be this guy. Never became that guy.
But again, Dable was only there for 3 of them, and he had a very good year, one of them, and then the next year Jones had major injuries. It's one thing if Dable had been here for all 6 years of Jones. He was here for 3 of them.
I don't think they're going to make the move because of lack of patience. I don't feel like they're going to keep him because of lack of patience. They're going to keep him because he's an actual good head coach. They're going to have to evaluate that. I feel like they're going to be they're close to hitting that button to fire him, but they're going to actually have to evaluate it. They're definitely close to hitting the button, but I think they're going to evaluate it. And they're probably going to find out he's a good head coach. They're probably going to keep him. But look, they're close in the button, but it's about, can you evaluate this guy? I don't think there's no more patience, but I think they're definitely going to evaluate. Not any more patience, but I think evaluations are going to be done. It's not going to be like, let's keep him for 6 years like they did with Daniel Jones. Let's get the same result every single season. That's really not what we're going to have happen, but it's going to be a lot of evaluation during the offseason or during even this season by the GM or by management evaluating Brian Dable.
Yeah, if they have a new GM, then that GM will go through that process. I mean, I'm sure the GM will come in with, some knowledge of Brian Dable as head coach, but then it'll be an internal evaluation. So there'll be a process there. And again, I think a new GM should be able to pick their own head coach and maybe decides to go another direction. But, if I'm that new GM, I'm strongly considering keeping Dable. I think he has shown enough. He has showed his ability as an offensive coach, a quarterback developer, and as a head coach. Look, it's not just, he's an offensive specialist, which he is, and a quarterback developer, which he is, but he showed in year 1 with the Giants, that he could be a head coach and he could do a very good job. And they had a very promising season. Last 2 years, been a disaster. But, again, I mean,
I don't think they're keeping because of patience. I don't think that's going to be what they're going to do.
No, it's not going to. Patience is not, because the Giants have shown historically that they are a patient franchise. Again, they've had more turnover in recent years with head coaches, but they're not going to make an impulsive decision. There are franchises that do that, but it certainly won't be the case with the Giants.
I don't think they're not going to be. I don't think they're going to be. They're going to be not patient. I feel like they're going to not be patient, but I think they're definitely. They could fire him, but I feel like they're going to look at it right before they fire him. They're going to look at it, evaluate. But I definitely don't think they're patient anymore. But I think they're definitely evaluators, and they're gonna take what they can get out of the evaluation, and they could fire him. I mean, it's a team that might be done being patient. Who knows?
But I think if you have a guy who's proven what he could do, developing quarterbacks, and building offenses, I mean, this is the prototypical situation for that. I don't, it's like it's the situation to have that guy as your head coach.
And also, I feel like he never got his quarterback. If I'm just saying this as if he got fired, but if he gets fired, he never got his head coach. I mean, never got his starting quarterback. Never got his one. I mean, he was always forced with Daniel Jones, the hand of Daniel Jones, forced that hand.
Yeah, he inherited Daniel Jones, and he did a very good job with him in year 1. So
gave him a lot of money. I mean, definitely.
Yeah. So this is a Brian Dable situation. You're going to draft a franchise quarterback. You're good chance you're getting number 1 pick. You're going to get a really high pick. You're going to get that franchise guy, hopefully. If
General
they,
manager gone, I think we could say about that. I think that Saquon move, even though you might not think it's bad, I think that it's fireable enough because it's going to be on the paper. It's going to be everywhere. You let this superstar go. This guy is going to go down probably as a top 5 running back of all time. You let him go. It's a big thing. You're probably going to get fired, and also just all the stuff about you not being able to draft an O-lineman. Same thing every single year with the O-line. So I think he's gone, definitely. Like, that's just one of the worst non-trade moves ever of just signing Daniel Jones at $160 million and not signing Saquon. One of probably on paper one of the worst looking moves, but that's just that's gonna be it for him. That's probably, I mean, every game that Saquon plays, it's gonna be, we're all looking at Joe Shea and being like, he could be a giant. But look, I understand where you're coming from. We wouldn't do anything else. But I think just the general manager and paying Daniel Jones, not paying Saquon, that on paper looks awful for him.
yeah. Yeah, I just think you always got to go back to what you thought of a move when it happened. And I thought when it happened, I mean, you tell me, you know better than I, but when the Saquon move happened, him going to Philadelphia, I mean, Giants fans were upset, but I remember a lot of Giants fans saying, makes sense. Giants are rebuilding. Let him go. We're not going to pay him. So I just think you have to go back to what you thought at the time the move was made. And then, I mean, you definitely got to evaluate results of moves too.
Well, yeah.
So this move looks even worse now than it did then. And yeah, I mean, it's a results-based business. So, us as fans or us as podcasters, as broadcasters, we share our opinion at the time something happens, and we're not held accountable. We're not in the position of authority within an organization. But, and ultimately it is results, so, we could say at the time, oh yeah, good move, by the GM, but then you see the results of it and it winds up being a bad move. And then, yeah, the GM is going to be held accountable for that. But, again, I think we got to be fair with that, where it's very easy now to just say, terrible move, get rid of the GM. But what did we think of it when it actually happened at the time? I'll give you an example from baseball. Chris Sale with the Red Sox. So I'm a Red Sox fan. They traded him last December. I was all for trading him. I love Chris Sale, but he had major injury problems.
I
think it was well worth having him with the Red Sox. He won a World Series with them. His first 2 years were really good, but then it just was lots of injuries and really tough for him. He fell for the guy. Great competitor. Seems like a great guy. But it was time to move on. It was time to trade him. I like the move. Now, they didn't get anything for him. They got Vaughn Grissom. So the return was not good. But, Chris Sale now goes on and wins the Cy Young with the Braves. And you got some Red Sox fans now, understandably so, say, oh, look, got rid of Chris Sale, goes on with Cy Young, bad move. No, I think it was the right move. I still think it was the right move. Now, I don't like the return, so I'm going to focus more on that, the return they got. They should have done a much better job in the return. But the move of trading Sale, I stand by that being the right move, despite him going on and winning the Cy Young this year with Atlanta.
Yeah, I mean, stinks he's on the Eagles, though. Like, Saquon. I think that obviously stinks. I mean, he's in the NFC East, in your arch rival, right in Philly. Like, it stinks. It's obviously looks bad. Like, he's in Philly. But yeah, I mean, I think on the surface, it was a move that he was an injury-prone guy. But I think they could look back at it and be like, they never really got him an actual line. So there's going to be a lot. You can get injured a lot as a running back if you don't get a good offensive line. So there goes Saquon's ACL. There goes his ankle. But that's because there's no O-line there. And now you bring him to the Eagles where there's a very good O-line. You look at him flourish and you look at him not get injured at all. Knock on wood, because you never want to see anybody get injured. Knock on wood. But he's not getting injured. So you look at that and you're like, maybe it was our fault that he wasn't good as a Giant, or wasn't was move onable and was replaceable. Maybe it was our fault. Maybe he wasn't. And maybe it was just like what product we were bringing on the offensive line. And it was get him injured a lot. Now we look at him as an injury-prone guy, but we could have fixed it in-house. And it's like,
Yeah, so how would he have done this year with the Giants offensive line? He would not have had nearly the year that he
no, because
has
the
had.
offensive line is still awful. Like, still pitiful.
Yeah, so what's the point of even having him on the team, having him still with the Giants if you got an offensive line like they do?
Well, I think it's
So,
obviously knowing that you could build it. I mean, it's just like,
well, I think now the NFL, again, it's a pass-first league. And running backs have been devalued. I mean, they're obviously an important player, important position on the field, but the importance of the running back has lessened over the years. I think that's a reality. It's a pass league. Way back when it was a run league, now it's a pass league. So, again, Barkley's a special talent, but teams, they do their evaluations. Like, look, it's not worth paying a running back this much, and then you have a bad offensive line, so this guy behind this offensive line, we got to totally rebuild the offensive line. So it just doesn't make any sense to have this guy on the team anymore. And I know he's a special talent. He goes to Philadelphia and he's having the year he is, and it's painful because it's the Eagles. But at the time of the move, I remember a lot of Giants fans saying, I don't like he's going to Philadelphia, but it makes sense.
yeah, it makes sense. But I think we all go up to what it's going to be on paper, especially in the New York media, as you bring up earlier. You're in New York. You can't make moves like that in New York. You can make moves like that in Milwaukee, but you can't make moves like that in New York. That's not going to fly. That's going to be on the paper. It's going to be what they're going to ask you. I mean, obviously, you can't make those moves in Milwaukee, but it's like, in New York, it's really in your face, like what you did wrong. And it's obviously a bad move. It's going to be in your face even more if he just keeps scoring for Philly and you keep seeing it on the news every day. And man, it stinks for him because this is going to be a move that really defines if he's going to be a GM or not. Because he let go a running back that he thought he was injury prone, thought he couldn't really, we didn't need him. Thought that, but right now it's looking like.
Yeah, but you know what? The other thing is this was a free agent signing. So, I mean, obviously a free agent signing is different than a trade. So it's not like when Babe Ruth was traded from the Red Sox to the Yankees. I talked about Chris Sale before. Like, that was a trade. So with a trade, it's like, well, I agreed with trading Sale, but the return was not enough. Saquon, it's free agency. We're letting you go, and he winds up signing with the Eagles. So it's like you let him go to the Eagles, but he chose to sign with the Eagles. You didn't send him to the Eagles. So, again,
but you
I
knew
just remember at the time it seemed like
you knew there was a team on the market with him. Like, obviously in Hard Knocks, they're talking about Mara was saying, "Oh, if he ended up with the Eagles, I wouldn't be able to sleep." So he obviously knew that he could end up with the Eagles. So, look, it's a situation that's very hard, but situation that you're not going to be able to learn from because you're going to be canned. I mean, this is a top 2 pick you drafted, and you let him go because you didn't want to pay him the money he wanted.
But the Giants have so many problems.
Yeah.
So
many. That's what I'm saying too.
I don't think that was on its own. Like, sometimes on its own something is a fireable offense or could be. I don't think it's a fireable offense. He didn't trade a marquee player to an arch rival, right? They decided that they weren't going to pay him. They weren't going to pay him what it required to keep him. Let him go. He winds up signing with the Eagles. So, I just think there's a bit of revisionist history there amongst the fans because of the year that Barkley has had, the Eagles are having, the year the Giants are having. So, yeah, it looks bad. But I think we got to get beyond how things look, the emotion, the optics, and say, what's the right evaluation about this move, and is it a fireable offense? I don't think that move alone is a fireable offense. If the GM's going to get fired, it's because the Giants roster's terrible.
Yeah,
and they've had bad rosters, for a long time now.
Yeah, I think that goes into it. I definitely think that goes into it. It's definitely the roster itself is a fireable offense. The
Yeah.
roster,
Well, the body of work with the
yeah,
roster. Yeah.
yeah, the
Um,
roster. But I mean, it's for Joe Shea. It's been a lot of just like letting people go. Like he let Saquon he's let a lot of guys go. But I think honestly, they couldn't hit it. They couldn't hit their value of money they wanted. They knew Philly went over, and they're like, you know what? They couldn't hit that They couldn't hit that money that they wanted to go up to. So they were like, let me go visit somewhere. So I think that it was. I think you say it better because it is a free agent signing. So it's like we didn't want him in offseason. Like not like we didn't want it, but like they hit a value. So let's go move, let's pivot somewhere else. So they definitely had time to pivot somewhere else. Well, the pivoting somewhere else wasn't good. So I think that's where we stand. Is the pivoting somewhere else wasn't good.
yeah. Yeah. Again, the Saquon move, the optics are terrible. But I think the case to fire the GM is where the roster's at. But he's been the GM for 3 years. So you know, I'm more. I'm much more open to a new GM than a new head coach. But again, I agree with you. If there's a new GM, then that GM should be able to pick the next head coach. But if you go with a new GM, I think that GM should really do an evaluation of Dable and strongly consider him as the head coach to keep him. But bottom line is, I think everybody agrees the New York Giants are a mess, and the rest of the season is going to be ugly again. I mean, they're looking at 2-15, 3-14, and it's a good chance to get them number one pick. So it's going to be an opportunity for to get that quarterback and get things going in the right direction. So Jack, we are pretty much at the end of our show. We did all Giants today. I mean, there's so much to talk about with them. You want to wrap up on with any final thoughts? I mean, maybe you have a Knicks thought you want to throw in there or something before we conclude today's show?
I mean, yeah, Knicks. And they launched off one in Utah. I mean, I think it's gonna be an 82 game season for them. It's gonna be a lot of rough patches, a lot of great stuff. That's where you bring in new players. You definitely have those type of things where you have some rough patches, some great stuff. I mean, a rough loss in Utah where you were flat. So it's gonna be a rough patch. There are gonna be some great times where you win in Phoenix by a lot. It's a season, but I think it's also amplified because you have a new team.
Yeah. Who the Knicks got next?
They got tonight. They got Denver.
Is that the end of the road trip? They've been on the road for a while now.
I don't think so. And they're on the road again.
I'm pulling it up now too. Knicks stand at 9-7.
I think that's the end of the road.
They go to the Mavericks on Wednesday.
They play one game in Dallas tonight. They're off the road. I mean, they're still on the road. They're playing.
Oh man, they got the Mavericks Wednesday and they got the Hornets on Friday.
I mean, they're not in the West anymore, but they're
Yeah.
still on the road. But yeah, it's a road trip, man. But they're gonna have to win games they're supposed to win. If they get split against Denver and Dallas, be good. I mean, Dallas without Luka, Denver with Jokic, with Murray, like they've struggled sometimes, but they've been great other times where they've shown their championship DNA. So, team that the Knicks could really compete with, and also Cat being out. So if Karl Anthony Towns is out, might as well just put in the L because who's gonna guard Karl Anthony Towns? What?
That's a tough spot. Tough enough game to begin with, but without Towns.
And then you go in the next game against Dallas without Luka. That's a game that you can pull out, but that's also a game they can lose. So with the Knicks, it's going to be a hard 2 games. But if we split, I'll be happy. But I think 2-0 is definitely it definitely goes with if Cat's healthy, everybody's healthy, and Deuce comes back. That definitely.
Yeah, or you can say the final 3 games in the road trip go 2-1.
Yeah.
Definitely got to beat Charlotte and then split the other 2 games. that would be successful. It'd be a winning road trip, 3-2. They beat the Suns. It was a good win. And then you're talking about the loss of the Jazz. So yeah, so the Knicks are at about a month into the season. So we'll talk about them more on the next show. Again, a lot of Giants today. I think it was well worth it. Jets fired their GM too, which he's been there longer, Joe Douglas, 6 years. So that didn't come as a surprise. So we'll get into the Jets more next week. They had their bye week, so nothing to talk about in terms of the game. Jets got Seattle upcoming, and the Giants play on Thanksgiving against the Cowboys.
Ooh,
so that'll
it's gonna be the battle of who wants to lose more. Who's gonna want to lose?
Yeah, I mean, there's an interesting part of that matchup. I mean, they both stink. Cowboys had a nice win yesterday against the Commanders, but we will watch the Giants take on Dallas on Thanksgiving. So another great show, Jack. We'll do it again next week. Everyone, thank you for joining us. Have a great week.